My mother's voice shattered the quiet of my 38th floor office. Nora. You need to come home right now. Your father has liver cancer, stage 2. We need $50,000. Come home now. Her voice cut through the speaker like broken glass, sharp and distorted with panic. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of my Manhattan office, the afternoon sun glinting off the steel and glass towers of Midtown. Below me, Fifth Avenue crawled with yellow cabs and black town cars. I was 30 years old, making $230,000 a year, with another $80,000 stashed away in savings. 50 grand was doable. But I didn't book a ticket. Instead, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I spent the next hour researching stage 2 liver cancer, standard treatment protocols, typical hospital costs, Medicare coverage. The numbers came together like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Out-of-pocket expenses, after insurance, usually fell somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000. $50,000. That was triple the number. Where was the extra $30,000 going? Then I thought of my sister. Vera. 27 years old, unemployed, 3 years out of a failed graduate school application, currently finding herself back home. My mother hadn't mentioned her once in that frantic phone call. On the 7th day, I found myself in the hospital corridor, my father's phone in my hands. The passcode was my mother's birthday, it had never changed. I scrolled through their WhatsApp conversation, moving backward through weeks of mundane messages. Then I found it, sent a week before her call. I told Nora it's stage 2 and we need $50,000. She should be able to come up with it. Once the money arrives, we'll put 30 toward Vera's study abroad, and the rest can go toward treatment. My father's reply, okay. 2 letters. 23 years of my life, reduced to a single word of agreement. I took a screenshot, opened the family group chat, 37 people in total, and pressed send. Then I typed, I'm not paying a cent. And I'm done being a Lin. My name is Nora Lin. In Chinese, Lin means a forest, a collection of trees standing together. But I'd always felt like the one tree at the edge of the woods, close enough to be part of the picture, far enough to catch all the shade. My grandmother chose my name. She told my mother that I'd nearly killed her during childbirth, so I should be called Nian, the character that means thought or memory, but also carries a connotation of being remembered only when convenient. A name that suggests someone you think about only when you have to. That was my origin story. Not a child born in love, but one who survived at her mother's expense. I'd heard it so many times that I stopped flinching at the telling. I learned early what that name meant in practice. I was 5 years old on a winter afternoon when my mother came to pick me up from kindergarten. I was wearing a red dress that used to belong to my sister Vera. The lace at the cuffs had been scratching at my wrists all day, leaving red welts on my skin, but I didn't care. It was the prettiest thing I'd ever worn. Vera had thrown it away because she said it was too itchy. My mother had tossed it into my lap and said, "Here, you wear it. You've got tougher skin anyway." When she saw the red marks on my arms, her face twisted. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't even pause to look at the welts. She slapped me across the face. The sound echoed through the classroom. Every child went quiet. My mother's hand left a red imprint on my cheek, and my lip split against the zipper of my coat. Blood filled my mouth, salty and warm. "Do you have any idea how much that dress cost?" she screamed. "You think we can afford to replace it because you're too stupid to know better." The teacher rushed over to intervene. My mother pulled her hand back, but the look in her eyes said everything I needed to understand for the rest of my childhood. That night, when my father came home, she told him I'd deliberately ruined Vera's dress. He didn't ask for my side. He didn't even look at me. He just swung his foot into my lower back, sending me sprawling across the floor. My forehead hit the corner of the coffee table and swelled into a lump the size of an egg. Vera sat on the sofa, eating potato chips and watching television. She didn't even turn her head. That was the first time I understood the rule of our house. Vera was the sun, and I was the moon. The sun shines on its own, and everyone orbits around it. The moon only reflects borrowed light, and if clouds come, nobody looks up. The rule held true, year after year. When Vera started piano lessons at 6, my mother bought her the best teacher in town. $300 a session, back when that was more than our weekly grocery budget. My mother drove her 40 minutes each way, rain or shine. Meanwhile, I walked home from school alone, 40 minutes through the streets, getting soaked in the rain, slipping on ice in the winter. One time I fell into a drainage ditch, my winter coat soaked through, my skin turning purple with cold. No one was home when I got there. Vera was at a piano competition, and my mother was there to watch. I was 7 years old. I changed into dry clothes, dragged a stool to the kitchen counter, and found leftover rice from the morning. It had gone cold and hard. I mixed it with hot water and ate it standing up in the dark kitchen. I never told anyone about that afternoon. What was the point? My mother would say, Vera's competition was important, and my father would say, you're fine, aren't you? I was fine. I was always fine. But every time I swallowed my hurt instead of speaking it, another pin lodged itself in my chest. Over the years, they multiplied until my heart felt like a pincushion, hundreds of tiny wounds, none fatal on its own, but together they let the cold air in. I never cried in front of them. Not after the slap, not after the ditch, not after any of it. I learned by the age of 5 that my tears had no value in that house. Vera's tears could move mountains. Mine only got me yelled at for being annoying. In 6th grade, I brought home a report card showing I'd ranked first in my class. Perfect score in math, only 2 points off in English. I ran all the way home, bursting with the hope that maybe this time, just once, they'd see me. My mother was cooking dinner. She glanced at the paper. Okay. Then she turned toward the living room. Vera. Did your English competition results come in? Vera's voice drifted back, lazy and indifferent. 3rd place. My mother dropped the spatula, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked into the living room with a smile spreading across her face. 3rd place. That's wonderful. How many students participated? I'm making braised pork ribs tonight to celebrate. I stood in the kitchen, clutching my perfect report card, the oil in the pan crackling like firecrackers. It was loud, but I felt a profound silence closing in around me. Something inside me shattered. I could hear it, the sound of a door closing, of hope retreating. That night, I lay in bed staring at the water stain on the ceiling. Yellowed and spreading like a map of nowhere. I thought about it for hours. Here's what I figured out, it wasn't about what I did. It was about who I was. I was Nora. The moon. The forgotten tree. The name my grandmother gave me because I nearly killed my mother. I would never get their approval. So I stopped wanting it. I poured everything into my studies. Not to impress them, I'd given up on that, but because I knew it was the only way out. I held on to that thought like a lifeline, never letting go no matter how tired I was. In middle school, I stayed in the top 3 of my class. When I scored in the top 1% of the city on the high school entrance exam, I qualified for any school I wanted. But my mother said the city's top academy was too expensive. She enrolled me instead at Northbrook High School, which offered a scholarship covering tuition and fees. I didn't argue. I'd stopped arguing years ago. Vera scored well below the cutoff. My mother paid $20,000 in fees to get her into Brookfield Academy's arts program. $20,000. That was our family's entire annual income. I packed my bags and went to Northbrook. 8 to a dorm room. No air conditioning, sweltering in the summer. But it felt like freedom, because I didn't have to go home every day. High school was the first time I tasted what it meant to breathe on my own. Hard, sure. But the hard was mine to choose. I woke at 5:30 every morning, stayed up until 11, studied by flashlight under the covers. My goal was sharp and simple: get into a good university, leave this city, never come back. Sophomore year, at the Lunar New Year dinner, Vera announced she was applying to the top music conservatory in the country. My mother actually cried. She said she'd sell everything to make it happen. My father nodded and said, "Don't worry about tuition, Vera. We'll manage." Then my mother turned to me. "Nora," she said, as if discussing the weather, "you're good at academics. Why not go into teaching? Teacher training is free. You'll have a stable job after graduation." I was in the middle of picking up food with my chopsticks. I paused for just a moment. Then I put the food in my bowl and said, "Sure." No argument. No explanation. No point. Senior year, I lived in the classroom. 5 hours of sleep, 10 minutes for meals, 5 minutes for showers. Every spare minute went to studying. I was first in the school, pulling further ahead with every exam. The teachers said I was the strongest candidate for the top universities they'd ever seen. 1 week before the college entrance exams, I got sick. 102 degrees of fever. I walked to the campus clinic alone, sat on the hard wooden chair, and watched the 4 drip into my arm. My phone buzzed. My mother's name on the screen. "Vera's going to Beijing next month for a masterclass with a famous pianist. It costs $1,800. Money's tight. Can you figure out your tuition and expenses yourself this year?" I stared at the fluorescent light on the ceiling. White, buzzing, endless. "Sure." When I hung up, the nurse came over to change my bag. She looked at me with concern. "You look awful, honey. Where's your family?" I smiled. "They're busy." She shook her head and walked away. I leaned back against the wall, closed my eyes, and let the tears fall. They slid down my cheeks and into my ears, warm and useless. I didn't wipe them away. My hand was holding my vocabulary notebook. After the tears stopped, I opened it and started memorizing again. On exam day, my fever had dropped but not broken. I took 2 painkillers and stumbled through the tests. Results came out at midnight. I sat on my dorm bed, hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to type my student number. The page loaded for a full 5 seconds, 5 seconds that felt like 5 years. 673 points. Ranked 37th in the province. I stared at the numbers. My first feeling wasn't joy. It was exhaustion. Like a string that had been pulled tight for 18 years just snapped. I dropped the phone on my bed, lay back, and cried. Soundless tears streaming down my face. I wasn't crying because I'd succeeded. I was crying because finally, I was allowed to leave. When it came time to choose a university, I picked Columbia in New York City. My mother called, her voice carrying a strange mix of surprise and calculation. "You got into Columbia. How much is tuition? Housing? Living expenses?" I told her the numbers. There was a long silence on the other end. "Well," she said, "you'll figure it out. Vera still needs to pay the balance on her masterclass." "I will," I said. "I'll figure it out." I spent the next week filling out scholarship applications, federal student loans, and work-study forms. I calculated every possible source of income and made a spreadsheet. Tuition covered by loans, housing covered by a scholarship, living expenses covered by on-campus work. It was tight, but it was possible. The night before I left for New York, I went home to pack. I didn't have much, my suitcase was barely half full. My mother watched TV in the living room. My father read the newspaper in his study. Vera practiced piano in her room, a series of disconnected notes drifting through the walls. No one came to help. No one offered to drive me to the train station in the morning. As I walked out the door, my mother called without looking up, "Text when you arrive." Okay. I closed the door behind me and stood in the dark hallway. The motion sensor light clicked off. I was surrounded by darkness. But I wasn't afraid. For 18 years, I'd been living in the dark. Now I was walking toward the light. College was the best 4 years of my life. Not because it was easy, it was harder than high school. But it was hard on my terms. Every morning I woke up and felt like the world was new. I managed everything myself. Federal loans covered tuition. A merit scholarship covered housing. Work-study paid for food and books. My sophomore year, I earned a national scholarship that felt like winning the lottery. And on weekends, I tutored high school kids at $150 per session. I kept a detailed budget, tracking every cent. I didn't buy new clothes, didn't eat out, didn't spend money on anything unnecessary. My friends joked that I was saving up to buy an island. I laughed along with them. But I was saving for something. Not a house, not yet. I was saving for freedom. Every dollar was another mile between me and that house. Every dollar meant I'd never have to ask anyone for help again. I chose financial engineering, the hardest track in the business school. Senior year, I took 40 hours of classes a week, 8 in the morning to 9 at night. But I didn't mind. I knew these skills were my weapons. I finished my junior year ranked first in the entire department. My advisor pulled me aside. "There's an exchange program with the London School of Economics next year. Interested?" I was. But then I asked about the cost, living expenses in London, flights, incidentals. At least $15,000 for the year. I called my mother. She answered after several rings. "Vera's applying to music schools abroad," she said, before I could finish my sentence. "We're putting everything toward that." "I'm sorry, Nora." I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even upset. I was just tired. "Okay," I said. "I understand." I never brought it up again. But that conversation planted a seed in my mind. A question I'd never let myself fully consider until that moment: what could I truly rely on in this world? Money. My money. Not my parents' money, not borrowed money. Money I earned myself. Because only then would I never have to bow to anyone again. Junior year, I started teaching myself to code. It wasn't part of my major, but I could see where the world was heading. I stayed in the library until closing time every night and spent 2 more hours at my laptop after I got back to my dorm. My roommates thought I was insane. "You're already top of the class, Nora. What else do you want?" I wanted this: when I graduated, no one would ever decide my future but me. Senior year, I got 4 job offers. The best one was from a tech company's strategic investment division. The starting salary wasn't spectacular, but the platform was top tier. I signed the contract and texted my family, "I found a job in New York. I won't need financial support anymore." My mother replied, "Great. Vera's expenses are high, so that's good." I stared at the message for a minute. Then I laughed. My roommate looked up from her desk. "What?" "Nothing," I said. "Just read something funny." After graduation, I started as an analyst in strategic investments. The workload was brutal. My first year I practically lived at the office. Weekends were a luxury I rarely allowed myself. But I never complained. Because every late night was a step I'd chosen. Every early morning was another victory. My direct supervisor was a woman named Rachel Sue. Early 30s, short hair, no makeup, a voice that never wavered. She was the first real, tough woman I'd ever met, not the kind who performed toughness in boardrooms, but the kind who'd built herself from nothing and didn't need to prove it to anyone. In meetings, she sat among a room full of men and commanded more attention than any of them. She took care of me in ways that were easy to miss. When I worked past midnight, she'd leave takeout on my desk without a word. When another department's director tried to undermine me during a presentation, she'd deflect the question with surgical precision and redirect the conversation. One night, after a late session, the office was empty. She came over and put a cup of coffee on my desk. "Nora," she said, "you're the hardest working new hire I've ever had." "Thank you, Rachel." She leaned against my desk and studied me for a moment. "You're hiding something, aren't you?" "Excuse me." "Your eyes," she said. "You've got that look. The one that says you're trying to prove something." "I know it because I used to wear it myself." I didn't respond. She didn't push. But then she added something I never expected. "My mother walked out when I was 12, she said, her voice flat. Left me with my father, who drank. I spent 3 years taking care of him before I realized I was the parent and he was the child. I left at 15. Spent 2 years on the streets before I figured out that nobody was coming to save me. So I saved myself." She shrugged, like it was nothing. "You remind me of who I was at your age. The difference is, you're smarter than me. You figured it out faster." I looked at her. "How old were you when you figured it out?" 24, she said with a small smile. "Took me longer than you. But I got there." She patted my shoulder and walked away. That night, I sat alone in the office, watching the lights of Manhattan flicker through the window. Rachel was right. I had been proving something, that I wasn't a burden, that I had value, that I deserved to be seen. That drive had carried me a long way. But I wasn't free of it yet. The shadow of that house still hung over me, a layer of dust I couldn't quite wipe clean. Second year, I got promoted. Salary doubled. I started saving obsessively. Every month, a fixed portion went into an account I never touched. The rest was for living. I still lived in a shared apartment, wore basics from Uniqlo, ate most meals at the office cafeteria. My colleagues joked about my Scrooge habits. I didn't care. What they thought of me had never mattered. What mattered were the numbers. Bank account, investment portfolio, salary line. Numbers were my armor. My weapons. The foundation I was building under my feet. Third year, the company launched a major new initiative in industrial investment. Rachel was put in charge, and she brought me into the core team. I spent 8 months commuting between New York, Boston, and Chicago, doing research, writing reports, meeting with partners. It was exhausting, and I loved every minute of it. During those 8 months, I went home only once. My grandmother had passed away. My father called with the news. I flew back for the funeral. The house was draped in white and black. The smell of incense and burning paper filled the air. My mother knelt in front of the altar, crying. Vera stood nearby in a white dress, lightly made up, looking as if she'd just stepped out of a casual afternoon. I walked up, knelt beside my mother, and bowed 3 times. She glanced at me. "So you came back." I didn't respond. I stayed at the house for the mourning period. My old room had been turned into a storage closet, filled with Vera's old music sheets, clothes she'd outgrown, and boxes of random things. My mother said, "You're never here anyway." So I cleared a small space on the floor, spread out a blanket, and slept there. On the 3rd night, I overheard my parents talking through the thin wall. Vera's still short on tuition, my mother said. Nora's making good money in New York now. Maybe she can help. How much do we need? My father asked. 30,000. I was thinking she could send 500 a month. That would cover it in 5 years. Does she know we're planning this? He said. Not yet. But she's always been the reasonable one. She'll understand. I lay on the floor, staring at the familiar water stain on the ceiling. My mouth twitched into something between a smile and a grimace. Reasonable. That was the word. My silence, my endurance, my refusal to fight, all of it boiled down to one word. Reasonable. Vera's demands, her entitlement, her endless drain on the family's resources, that was a child who needs support. The child who needed support got love. The reasonable one got exploitation. And for what? Because I'd been born second. Because my grandmother named me remembered only when convenient. I pulled the blanket over my head and made a decision. I would not give them a penny. Vera's education was not my problem. I'd been told, there's no money, when I needed support for my own future. Now they wanted me to fund hers. After the funeral, I booked my return ticket. Before I left, my father pulled me aside. We're in a difficult position, Nora. Vera needs help. You have a good income now. I cut him off. Dad, I earned every dollar I have. I have my own plans. I can't support the family financially right now. The surprise in his eyes curdled into anger. Vera's future is the family's future. You're turning your back on us. I'm not turning my back on anyone. But my money is my own. I had never spoken to him that way before. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Nothing came out. I walked out of the house with my suitcase, and behind me, I heard him exhale a long, heavy sigh. I didn't look back. Back in New York, I threw myself into work with renewed intensity. The industrial investment project wrapped up successfully. At the final presentation, the head of the group personally stood up and named me as one of the key contributors. The entire room applauded. I stood under the lights, and for a moment, it felt like I was back in that kitchen, holding my perfect report card, waiting. This time, there were hundreds of people applauding. Rachel came up afterward and clapped me on the shoulder. Congratulations. Promotion papers are coming down next week. Thank you. She studied me for a moment. You know, she said, you're starting to remind me of myself. I laughed. But inside, a quiet voice said, I don't want to be like anyone. I just want to be myself. That year, I turned 26. My annual salary crossed $200,000. The first thing I did was buy a small apartment, a 400-square-foot loft on the outskirts of the city. The down payment took almost everything I'd saved. I borrowed $10,000 from Rachel. She transferred it without hesitation, no interest, no questions. When I got the keys, I walked into the empty space and stood by the window, watching the afternoon light spill across the bare floor. Then I started crying. Not quiet tears, ugly, heaving sobs. I crouched down, buried my face in my knees, and cried like a child. 18 years. From the slap that split my lip to this moment, 18 years. I finally had a place that was mine. No one could kick me out. No one could take it from me. No one could turn it into a storage closet while I was gone. A home. I spent the next few months decorating it the way I wanted. A big desk by the window, good lighting, everything I'd never had. No more studying by a 15-watt bulb in a dark kitchen. On my first night in the new apartment, I opened a bottle of wine and toasted the city lights outside my window. To the 5-year-old who didn't cry. To the 7-year-old who walked home alone in the snow. To the 17-year-old who sat in the clinic with a fever and no one to hold her hand. To the 22-year-old who never bought a single new piece of clothing in 4 years of college. You did it. No one will hurt you like that again. I thought that was the end of the story. A decent enough ending, my own home, my own career, my own savings. A distant, polite relationship with the family I'd left behind. Boundaries, finally, firmly in place. But fate wasn't done with me yet. 6 months after I bought my apartment, I was promoted again, this time to associate director of the department. My team grew to 5. My salary increased significantly. At the same time, Vera's study abroad applications fell through. Not a single music school, in Europe or America, accepted her. My mother called to tell me. The schools are too competitive, she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. Vera's talent is more than enough. She just had bad luck. Okay. She needs to come home and take some time to regroup. Then she'll reapply next year. Okay. Nora, she said, you live alone in that apartment, don't you? Your sister could stay with you for a while. She doesn't know anyone in New York. You could help her adjust. I almost laughed out loud. Mom, my apartment is 400 square feet. It's barely enough for one person. Don't be difficult. Your sisters. I said no. My voice was calm, but the refusal was absolute. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then my mother spoke in a tone I'd never heard from her before. Nora, are you still angry about all that childhood stuff? I didn't answer. Because whatever I said, yes or no, would change nothing. So I hung up. But that phone call planted something else in my mind. A question I'd been avoiding for years: was I still angry? And if I was, what was I going to do about it? I thought about Rachel, about the story she'd told me. She'd left at 15, survived on her own, and never looked back. She didn't waste energy on anger. She channeled it into building something better. I wanted to be like that. Not the pain, I couldn't undo that. But the forward motion. The refusal to let the past define the future. The storm came about a week later. I was in a meeting, phone on silent, when the screen started flashing. One call after another. All from my mother. 10 missed calls, then 12, then 15. When the meeting ended, I stepped into the hallway and checked my messages. The most recent one was a voice note. I pressed play. Nora. Get back here now. Your father has liver cancer. Stage 2. He's in the hospital. You need to come home. My chest went cold. I hadn't spoken to my father in months. We drifted into the kind of distance that only exists between people who are related by blood but nothing else. But he was still my father. The word cancer hit me like a punch to the ribs. I asked for emergency leave and booked the next train home. I arrived at the hospital at 1 in the morning. My father was in the oncology ward, and my mother sat in the hallway, red-eyed and disheveled. She looked older than I remembered, 15 years older. When she saw me, she broke down again. Nora, she said, the treatment is going to cost $50,000. We need your help. I sat down next to her. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just listened as she described the treatment plan, the surgery, the recovery costs. $50,000. It wasn't pocket change, but I could cover it. Where's Vera? I asked. My mother's face tightened. Your sister is under a lot of pressure right now. She doesn't have a job. She's been home for 2 years. Where is she? She's resting. I stood up and walked into the hospital room. My father was in a hospital bed, looking thinner than I remembered. He was asleep. My mother followed me in. I turned and faced her. Let me see the medical records. He's my husband. You think I'm lying? I just want to see the records. She hesitated, then pulled a folder from her bag. I spent the next few minutes reading through it. Diagnosis, CT scans, lab results, treatment plans, estimated costs. Stage 2 liver cancer. That was real. But the numbers didn't add up. I stepped outside and called Rachel. I walked through the treatment options, the insurance coverage, the expected out-of-pocket expenses. Rachel listened, then said, "You're right. That doesn't match." "Rachel," I said, "I need your advice." "On what?" "I need to know where the extra $30,000 is going." Rachel was silent for a moment. Then she said, "If you want my honest opinion, you need to find out. Because if they're lying to you about your father's health to get money, you need to know exactly what you're dealing with." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in a cheap hotel room near the hospital and stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I thought about every time I'd been lied to, every time I'd been told, "There's no money," while Vera got everything she wanted. I thought about the pattern, the endless pattern of my needs being minimized and Vera's being prioritized. And I thought about what I would do if I found out the truth. The next day, I started paying closer attention. I visited the hospital every afternoon, brought snacks for my father, sat with him while he dozed. I didn't ask too many questions. I just watched. And I waited. The opportunity came on the third day. My mother left to make a phone call. My father had drifted off to sleep. His phone was lying on the bedside table, screen still lit. I picked it up. The passcode hadn't changed, my mother's birthday. I opened his WhatsApp and scrolled through the messages. 1 week before my mother's call, there it was. "I told Nora it's stage 2 and we need 50,000. She should be able to come up with it. Once the money arrives, we'll put 30 toward Vera's study abroad, and the rest can go toward treatment." My father's reply, "Okay." I read the message 3 times. My vision blurred, but I kept reading. I took a screenshot and sent it to my own phone. Then I wiped the screen and put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. Then I walked out of the room, past the nurse's station, down the hallway, and into the stairwell. I leaned against the cold concrete wall and pulled out my phone. I opened the family group chat. My mother, my father, Vera, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, 37 people in total. I selected the screenshot and pressed send. Then I typed, "I'm not paying a cent. And I'm done being a Lynn." The replies came within seconds. My mother called. I declined. She called again. I declined again. Then messages started rolling in. "What is this? Is this true? Vera, what's going on?" My mother's voice, through the voice notes, "Nora, you're destroying this family. Delete it now. Now." I sent one more message, "I'm telling the truth. That's all I've ever done." Then I turned off my phone and walked out of the hospital. I didn't walk far. I went to the small hotel across the street, checked in, and sat by the window. From the 5th floor, I could see the hospital entrance. I watched the revolving doors turn, people coming and going in the cold night air. A woman in a nurse's uniform smoked a cigarette by the curb. An ambulance pulled up, silent, its lights flashing red and white. I knew what was happening in that building. My mother was probably crying in the hallway, calling relatives, trying to explain. Vera was probably hiding in my father's room, refusing to talk to anyone. My father, I didn't know what he was doing. Maybe sleeping. Maybe staring at the ceiling, like I used to do in my childhood room. I sat there for 2 hours, watching, thinking. Then I made a decision. I got up, walked back across the street, and went straight to my father's room. My mother was there, sitting by the bed, her phone in her hand. When she saw me, she froze. Her face was blotchy from crying, her eyes swollen. "Mom," I said, "we need to talk." She stood up. "You have no right." "Vera, get in here," I called. Vera appeared in the doorway. For once, she wasn't wearing a pretty dress or makeup. Her face was bare, pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. I took out my phone and opened the screenshot. I held it up so both of them could see. "Can you read this out loud for me, Vera? Since it's your money we're talking about." Vera stared at the screen. Her mouth opened, then closed. She glanced at my mother, then back at me. I didn't know she was going to. "Yes or no," I said. "Did you know about this?" She looked at the floor. "I'll take that as a yes." I put the phone away. You know what the worst part is? I wouldn't have said no. If you'd told me the truth, if you'd said, "Nora, we're in trouble, can you help?" I probably would have said yes. Because you're still my family, no matter what. I looked at my father, who was awake now, watching from the bed. His face was pale, his eyes wet. "But you didn't ask. You planned. You schemed. You treated me like a bank account with legs." I pulled out my phone one last time. "So here's what I'm going to do. I'll pay for the medical treatment, the actual treatment, the $20,000 that the insurance doesn't cover. Not a cent more. That's a gift, not a loan. You don't have to pay it back." My mother started to speak. I raised my hand. "But I'm done being your daughter. I'm done being Vera's sister. I'm done being the reasonable one who pays for everyone else's dreams while her own get thrown away." I turned to my father. "Dad, I'm sorry you're sick. I'll make sure you get the care you need. But after that, don't call me. Don't text me. I'll send updates through Auntie May." Then I looked at Vera. "And you, I hope the piano makes you happy. Because it cost you a sister." I walked out. This time, I didn't look back. Checked out of the hotel and took the next train back to New York. On the ride, I turned my phone back on. The family group chat had exploded. 347 messages. I scrolled through them. At first, the older relatives were furious at me for airing dirty laundry. "Family matters should stay within the family," my uncle said. "Why are you putting this online for everyone to see?" Then, slowly, the tone shifted. "Wait, the treatment cost is only $20,000. Why was she asking for 50? If she's sick, that's one thing. But taking money meant for treatment and giving it to her other daughter? That's not right. Nora's been put last her whole life. And now this." My second aunt, Auntie May, called me privately. "Nora, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was this bad. I've seen the way your mother treats you, but I never said anything. I should have." Then my youngest aunt, Auntie June, posted in the group, "This is wrong. Nora has been the one taking care of herself since she was a child. Now they want to take the money she earned to fund Vera's study abroad. How is that fair?" Messages poured out. Memories, long buried, surfaced. Who remembered the time Nora came home soaked in the rain with no one to meet her? Who remembered Nora's scholarship to Brookfield Academy, and how she was sent to Northbrook instead because of the tuition? Who remembered the call, years ago, when Nora asked for help with her study abroad, and was told there was no money? Everyone remembered. They'd just chosen not to see. Finally, after 3 days of arguing, the oldest elder in the family, my grandfather's brother, sent his verdict. The money Nora earns is her own. No one has the right to take it from her. Medical treatment should be funded from medical savings, and Vera's education should be Vera's responsibility. This matter is closed. No one speaks of it again. It was done. After that, my mother didn't call me again. Vera posted a selfie on social media with a caption, "Some hearts just can't be warmed." I liked it, then blocked her. I heard later through Auntie May that my mother scrambled to borrow money from anyone who would lend it. She scraped together 15,000 and sent Vera to England for a language school program. Vera went. She stayed in a small town, studied English, and reapplied to music schools. 3 applications. 3 rejections. Auntie May told me that Vera cried for 3 days after the final rejection. She locked herself in her room and wouldn't come out. My mother sat outside the door, talking to her through the wood, saying it would be okay, that they'd figure something out. But there was nothing to figure out. Vera had spent years chasing a dream she wasn't talented enough to catch. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not because I was cruel, but because I had spent my whole life being told my dreams didn't matter. And I had survived. She could too. But I did feel something, in a quiet corner of my chest. A flicker of pity. Not for Vera, for my mother. She had spent 27 years investing everything in one child, and that child had nothing to show for it. She had nothing left. Meanwhile, my career took off. My company launched a new industrial investment arm, and Rachel was put in charge. The first thing she did was ask for me. I was promoted to lead the team, overseeing 30 people instead of 5. My compensation shifted from fixed salary to a performance-based model. On the day my appointment was confirmed, Rachel opened a bottle of champagne in her office. "Congratulations, Nora," she said, handing me a glass. "Thank you. I don't think I could have done this without you." She shook her head. "You did this. Not me. Not this company. You earned it. You've been fighting for this your whole life, and you deserve it." I smiled and looked away, my eyes stinging. That night, I sat in my apartment and thought about something I hadn't thought about in years. When I was in elementary school, I used to walk past a bakery on my way home. In the window, there was always a strawberry cake with white cream and bright red fruit. It looked fake, like something from a picture book. I used to stop and stare at it until my mother pulled me away. "Don't even think about it. It's expensive and you won't even finish it." I never had a birthday cake of my own. Vera always got one, a big double-layer cake with candles, and everyone would gather around and sing. I'd get the smallest slice, the one where the cream had been smeared from the cutting. I used to think, when I grow up and have my own money, I'll buy the biggest, most beautiful strawberry cake I can find. And then I grew up and forgot. The next weekend, I walked into a bakery and ordered a strawberry cake. 6 inches, perfect layers, red strawberries arranged like jewels on top. I brought it home, sat down at my coffee table, lit a single candle, and sang myself happy birthday. Halfway through, I started crying. Not because I was sad. Because I was finally taking care of myself. I didn't need anyone's permission. I didn't need to wait for scraps. I was the one buying the cake, singing the song, living my own life. I was 28 years old, 23 years removed from the day I'd been slapped in that kindergarten classroom. At 30, I was named the founding partner and CEO of a new fund, with the firm committing $5 billion in seed capital. I'd finally reached the position I'd been working toward for half my life. The messages came flooding in. Old classmates, former colleagues, business partners, everyone wanted to congratulate me. I spent an hour responding to them all. The last message that night came from Auntie May. "Nora, I saw you in the news. I'm so proud of you." Then she added, "Your mother saw it too." I stared at the words for a long time. Then I typed, "Thank you, Auntie May," and put my phone down. I still don't know what my mother felt when she saw that news story. Maybe regret. Maybe pride. Maybe she told her neighbors, "That's my daughter." I don't know. And I stopped needing to know. What I care about now is the investment decision on Monday, the fundraising roadshow next month, the annual returns. The question I ask myself changed, somewhere along the way, from, "Do they love me?" to, "How much better can I become?" That shift took 23 years. But it was worth every second. 3 months later, I was invited to speak at the Women in Finance Leadership Summit in New York. 500 people in the audience. Leading bankers, fund managers, executives from across the country. I stood backstage, my heart pounding. I had given presentations before, to boards, to investors, to partners. But this was different. This was personal. I stepped onto the stage. The spotlight hit me like a wave of heat. I looked out at the sea of faces and took a breath. "My name is Nora Lynn," I said. "I'm not going to talk to you about balance sheets or leveraged buyouts today. I'm going to tell you a story about a 5-year-old girl who got slapped for wearing a hand-me-down dress." I told them everything. The red dress. The piano lessons I never got. The 17-year-old who sat alone in a clinic with a fever and no one to hold her hand. The phone call telling me there was no money for my exchange program while my sister got a masterclass. I told them about the $50,000 that was really for Vera. The screenshot. The group chat. The walkout. I told them about the strawberry cake. When I finished, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the entire room rose to its feet. 500 people, applauding. I stood there, under the lights, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged in the spotlight. Afterward, one of the organizers came up to me. "Nora, that was incredible. How did you do it? How did you survive all that?" I thought about it for a moment. I stopped asking them to love me. And I started loving myself. A few weeks later, Auntie May sent me a video clip. It was a family dinner back home. My relatives were gathered around a table, laughing, eating. In the corner of the screen, my mother sat alone. Her face was older now, thinner. She stared at her plate without eating. Auntie May wrote, "She asked about you tonight. She wanted to know if you were doing okay." I watched the video twice. Then I typed, "Tell her I'm doing great. Send." One day, a package arrived at my apartment. Return address, my mother. I opened it. Inside was a pair of hand-sewn cotton shoes, black, the soles stitched in careful, even rows. A note, in my mother's crooked handwriting, "It's cold. Wear warm socks." I held the shoes for a long time. Then I put them in the back of my closet, next to other things I don't use but can't throw away. Some words should have been said 2 decades ago. Now they don't need to be said at all. The year I turned 31, I moved into a new apartment. 3,000 square feet overlooking Central Park. On moving day, I packed a single suitcase by myself. Inside, my college acceptance letter, my first pay stub, my first credit card, my passport. And the black shoes. I placed them on the shelf by the door, next to the expensive heels I wear to meetings. They look out of place, like someone who walked into the wrong party. But I can't throw them away. Because every time I see them, I remember the little girl who did her homework in a dark kitchen. The child who walked home through the snow. The teenager who sat alone in a clinic with a fever and no one to hold her hand. I want to tell them, you're going to be okay. You're going to have everything you ever wanted. Not because anyone gave it to you, but because you built it yourself. Piece by piece. Year by year. From nothing to something. That first night in my new apartment, I stood at the window and watched the city lights spread out below me like a carpet of stars. My phone buzzed. Auntie May sent another video clip. This time, it was from a different gathering, a small one, just a few people. My mother was there, sitting at the table. She looked older, frilier. The camera moved closer. And then I saw it. On the wall behind her, there was something new. A small framed picture, not a family portrait, not a photo of Vera. It was a newspaper clipping, cut out and mounted in a simple black frame. It was me. Standing on stage at the Women in Finance Summit, receiving the award. I zoomed in on the image. It was definitely me, in that moment, smiling, holding the plaque. Auntie May's message came through. She got a neighbor to clip it from the paper. She's had it up for 2 weeks now. She doesn't talk about you. But she looks at it every night. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed, "Thank you for telling me." I put down the phone and walked to the center of the room. The lights were warm. The apartment was quiet. On the wall, near the entrance, hung a calligraphy scroll I'd commissioned for myself. 6 characters, wishes come true. The name I was given, the one that meant, remembered only when needed, had become, finally, my own word. My own story. My own triumph. The city glowed outside. There are so many people in this city, people who grew up the way I did, who were told they weren't enough, who were treated like shadows in their own homes. They might still be in the dark. They might not see the light yet. But I want to say to them, keep walking. Don't look back. Walk far enough that when you do turn around, your past is small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. And then you'll realize, the warmth you were looking for was inside you all along. That night, I slept. No dreams.